introductions, board games, screaming in the street. Join us for these topics and more today on the Passport Game Studios podcast, where adventure awaits. Hello there, and welcome to the inaugural episode of the Passport Game Studios podcast. My name is Chaz Marler, and I will be serving as one of three panelists who will be sharing the mic with me today on the show. Before we bring on my two co-hosts, though, allow me to take this moment to introduce you to myself and Passport Game Studios. Passport Game Studios, or PGS, is a board game publishing company that was founded in 2012. And since then, PGS has published over 60 games, including Trajan, CV, Quantum, Food Chain Magnate, Exodus, Proxima Centauri, and Takedo. Now, most people are familiar with the games, but what about the people behind the scenes at PGS helping make those games happen? Well, answering that question is the purpose of this podcast. Now, instead of Passport Game Studios being seen as some faceless corporation emotionlessly secreting board games, we want to build a community along with the people playing our games. And a perfect way to get started doing that is going to be to introduce our panelists. So, first of all, as I mentioned, there's going to be me, Chaz, who is PGS's Community and Customer Relations Manager. So that means if you contact us through Facebook, Twitter, or our website, I'm the one who makes sure that your correspondence is seen and responded to by the appropriate person. I've also been putting my media production experience to use by producing content for the PGS YouTube channel and hosting a podcast that you just happen to be listening to at this very moment. So that's kind of an eerie coincidence. But I am not alone in this podcasting endeavor. I will be joined by several other panelists. And joining me on the panel, as always, I think even though this is our first episode, always still technically counts, is Ryan Skinner. So why don't you introduce yourself, Ryan, and give us a little info on what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am the marketing manager here at Passport. So I am in charge of all things marketing. So that consists of working with our distributors, working with our consumers, basically getting our games out in front of the audience, as big an audience as possible.
Fascinating. But Ryan and I are not alone in this studio. We're also joined on this side by Scott Morris, Passport president, and he's going to tell us a little bit of what he does.
Yeah, hey everybody. I'm Scott Morris. I'm president of Passport Games. President is a fancy way of saying wears a lot of hats. In my day-to-day operations, I am general manager of the company, and I work with our distributors and our partners, making sure that we select the right games to put in our catalog. We bring the right games to you and hopefully motivate and appropriately put the right people in the right place to make sure our team is doing everything right to get those things on your tables.
And Scott, as president, you'd probably be the best one to answer this question. A lot of people come to me on the street and they shout at me that they want to know, what is Passport about? Are we just another game publisher? Do we have a certain specialty that we do? What's Passport's approach to the board game industry?
Well, the first approach is to not walk down streets where people shout at you. The main approach, though, is that we're a company that works with a lot of overseas partners. We're based in the U.S. We have a lot of partners that are in France, in Greece, and different locations around the world that have great games and are looking to more broadly distribute them. So we bring them to America. We sell them worldwide in most cases, but every partnership is different. Our foundation game is Takedo, which most people have heard of from Funforge. We do a lot of their games in their catalog. We also work with Luda Creations. We work with NSKN Games, Joker Unity, several companies that make absolutely phenomenal, great games that are really fun to play, and our goal is to bring them to all the people who want to play them.
That's what's really interesting to me about the name Passport Game Studios. It wasn't until just a couple weeks ago that I finally realized that it wasn't just a catchy name, but the whole Passport fits into the business model there of bringing these games over from Europe and other places. And I thought that was a really nice approach.
Yeah, and one of the things you'll see from us starting this year, which is why our team has changed quite a bit this year, is that we're going to be working more on self-publishing as well. And we've brought a couple of games out already. We've had Fool's Gold, and we've had Salem. Salem was just released at Origins this year. Fool's Gold was late last year. We're also going to have a game called Quartz, which we're going to talk a little bit about today, and a game called Three Wishes coming out this year, which are Quartz is our publication, and Three Wishes is a combo partner publication with us and Strawberry Studios, which is a smaller studio from NSKN. So we're both going to continue that model of bringing games over, but we're also going to be making our own and exporting them.
And what's really nice is that we're not just sitting here making games hand over fist, but we're also people who play games. And so what I wanted to do is kind of kick off the show with a way to get to know us a little bit better. Let's just briefly mention the most recent game that we've played, no matter what it is. For example, this last weekend, I got to play for the second time Imhotep by Cosmos, and this game I just fell in love with. I won't go into a long, detailed expose of how the game works. I'll let you discover that for yourself, but I have found this game to be an excellent game. It's simple but challenging, and you can play it with other gamers and with your family. And my wife and my 9-year-old daughter joined me, and we all enjoyed this game, Imhotep. Ryan, what's the most recent game you've been playing?
Yeah, the most recent thing I played was The Gallerist from Eagle Griffin Games this weekend. It was a long time coming. I've been looking forward to playing this, and I actually learned it on the Tabletopia digital platform, which I have recently fallen in love with, to a scary degree, perhaps. I'm just completely engrossed in wanting to utilize that platform. It's awesome. But the game itself was really great. It's a really involved Euro-style worker placement game, and I really enjoyed it.
And Scott, what game have you most recently brought to the table?
I've been playing a lot, mostly because I went to a convention this past weekend, but the one that I have played not as PGS game, but as somebody else's game, which is really cool, is a game called Roll Player, R-O-L-L Player, from Thunderworks, which is a unique design of a game. It was one of the first Kickstarters I've backed that I received, and after playing it the first time, didn't immediately say, oh, this just reminds me of something else. It was extremely unique. You're actually building a character that is a role-playing character. So the whole point of the game is for you to use dice, manipulate dice, and actually create this character to the best of your ability. And the person who creates the best character is going to win. You're actually not role-playing. You're not playing a role-playing, R-O-L-E playing game. You're rolling dice, manipulating them, and I just love dice, so I'm in for things like that.
Are the stats, the character stats, resources you're managing, or how are you building these characters?
You place dice into a tableau like a character sheet. So if you place a dice into the strength attribute, the number of pips count towards the total of your strength, and then if you put it in that line, you get an ability to use, and each ability gives you a different option. So you might flip a die, you might re-roll a die, you might swap dice, things like that. So I love dice, so I'm in.
Wow, so they really did introduce the concept of rolling up a character into an actual game.
Literally, yeah, literally.
It's awesome.
Wow. All right, so I wanted to put a twist on this, though. I couldn't leave well enough alone. So I wanted to introduce the very first installment of a little mini game about this that we're going to play.
It's Mario Party, yay.
Yeah. Get out your little blue shells. And what we're going to do is, other than the game that you played yourself, if you had to pick one of the other two people's games, which one of their games would you prefer to play and why? For example, if I had to choose between The Gallerist and Roll Player, I think I would gravitate towards trying Roll Player next, because I'm a sucker for dice. And just the fact that they took a standard game element, rolling up a character, and gamified that just really intrigues me. So that would be my pick. What about you, Ryan?
So between Roll Player or Emotep, I can say that I've actually played Emotep on several occasions recently. It's one that is really great, so I would also have to go towards Roll Player. I feel really bad that I ended up not backing that campaign on Kickstarter. I remember looking at it and thinking it was a really neat concept, and for whatever reason, which I don't recall, I just ended up not backing. And now that everyone's getting it and raving about it, I'm feeling left out. So I can't wait to try to get my hands on it later and play it soon, hopefully. So, though I do think it is also on Tabletopia, so I might have to check that out.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. All right.
It is. Yes, it is.
And that makes it a lot more accessible to people that didn't back the Kickstarter.
Right.
So, Scott, your choices are Imhotep and the Gallerist.
Imhotep. That's the only way I can say that game. I always think of that movie, the Mummy, and when the guy turns around with all the zombies chasing him, going Imhotep. But I've played Imhotep a lot. I do like the game. It's very fun. If I had to choose between the two, I would gravitate towards Gallerist. I don't get enough time or as much time as I would like to play larger, deeper Euro games, but I do love them, and I have played the Gallerist 3 times, loved it all 3 times, screwed up something every time I've played it, so I would definitely want to play it again and try it. So.
Well, excellent. So now we're in the mindset of talking about games and different mechanisms. So we've had our appetizer, so let's move right on to the main course, our primary topic for this episode. And I wanted to talk a little bit about Push Your Luck. It's a mechanism that recently I've been discussing with other people. It's kind of been on the top of my mind because I've had some recent experiences with Push Your Luck where people have just raved about it, and the others, it has totally turned them off to the game that we were playing. Just because
Are these
of
the same people that are shouting at you?
On the street. That's right.
Some of them, maybe. So first of all, let's define what we're talking about here. What is Push Your Luck? How would we define it? For me, I think it's really where you have to weigh risk versus reward while you're playing. When you're playing a Push Your Luck game, you're going to be faced with making either the same choice repeatedly or a series of choices, and you have to make the decision whether you're going to continue making that choice, making that move, and the further that you do it, the greater your potential reward will be. However, there's always got to be this chance that you could go too far and boom, in one shot, lose it all.
Right. Yeah, that sounds pretty accurate to me.
You are correct.
I won this portion. Yay. I lost the which would you rather play, but I won the segment description. And one of the reasons why it's been on the top of my mind so much is one of the recent releases that Passport has come out with. Quartz is based fundamentally on this Push Your Luck aspect. In Quartz, everyone plays a dwarf, and you're pulling gems out of this bag randomly. And the more gems you pull out, the greater your reward could be at the end of your turn. But if you pull out 2 of these black obsidian gems, your turn's over, and you lose everything you've pulled out to date, or of that on that turn. You lose everything that you pulled out on that turn. So there's a kind of a simple game where the crux of the game is this Push Your Luck aspect. And I wanted to find out how this Push Your Luck mechanism, not just in Quartz, but in other games, how it has affected your gameplay experiences and how the different games that have utilized this mechanism, kind of compare to each other. So, I'm going to turn things over to Scott next and circle back to myself and Ryan afterwards. But since you enjoy dice so much, I'm sure there's got to be some sort of dice game out there that utilizes this Push Your Luck aspect that you could use as an illustration.
There is, yeah. So there's a lot, actually. Push Your Luck is done with cards. It's done with dice. With Quartz, it's done with gems. And that's one of the things that I like about Quartz is it has both a unique appeal to how you press your luck, but it also has a unique appeal just in the medium in which you're pressing your luck.
Right.
It seems so simple. Just pull out a gem. What could go wrong, right? And yeah, everything can get very chaotic and very fun really, really quick, which is a lot of fun. For me, I have a lot of experience with Press Your Luck. Just the mechanic alone. For anyone who may not know, I have designed my own game called Firefly Shiny Dice, which is a Press Your Luck game set in the Firefly universe, which most people who have watched it love and adore, as I do. It was a game that I designed with my son, actually, via an accident. It was complete we were playing one game, and we realized that it was Press Your Luck, but it wasn't really meaty, meaningful decisions until about a quarter of the way through. So we wanted to make it harder, and that was our whole goal. We actually ultimately ended up with a game that I actually consider, and I tell people, is not the average press your luck game. When you look at the market and all the different press your luck games that are on the market, most of them are really designed to be casual games. They're luck driven, hence the name press your luck and not press your strategy. But the idea is that you can pick up the game with anyone of most ages and have a great time playing it, and not feel like you put, an hour into the game and you got, hosed and you lost because of a bad strategic move. It's, usually dice or a random pull or a random card draw or something like that. So everyone has an equal playing field. With Firefly Shiny Dice, we wanted to make it much harder, so we came at it from a different aspect. I've actually had a lot of people tell me things like, hey, this game is really punishing, or hey, this game is much harder than I expected it to be. And I have to, kind of laugh a little bit internally and then say, yes, that was the goal, right? The goal was to make it a little harder. So comparing something like my game that I designed, which was for another company, but comparing Firefly Shiny Dice to Quartz, they're kind of on two different sides of the spectrum. Quartz is a casual game. It is something that you can pick up and play with your kids, with your family, with pretty much any gamer of any age, and really enjoy. It's also very modular, I think. I actually played, like I'd mentioned earlier, I'd gone to a convention this past weekend. There was a family there with younger kids, like 6 and 7 years old, and they wanted to try Quartz. I had a copy with me, and they wanted to try it. And there are cards in Quartz that allow you to interact with other players. And their first thing was they were like, well, I'm not sure if they're going to grasp onto the cards immediately. And we immediately on the fly came up with, well, we can just leave the cards out and you can just pull gems or choose to leave them on and press your luck purely by only pulling the gems. And the kids loved it and the parents loved it. They were like, wow, it's really cool that it's modular like that. So it's designed to be that more casual experience. And I think it pulls it off pretty well. But when you look at the market as a whole, there's a very wide range of different types of press your luck, push your luck mechanics that are in games out there, and I think Quartz kind of sets itself off a little uniquely in that way.
Yeah, I've never considered trying the game without the cards or taking a game and kind of breaking it into pieces like that, and that's cool that Quartz can work that way.
Yeah, we did it completely on the fly, and it was really cool to see because the kids were just so in tune to what's Jimmy pulling out of the bag, what's Lucy pulling out of the bag, and no lie, that was their names. So.
The level of player interaction is something I want to come back to in just a minute, but I want to touch on something else that you said, which was about the uniqueness of the experience. And I know when we were discussing this topic beforehand, Ryan mentioned a push your luck game that made both of us initially go, what? Push your luck? Oh, yeah, I guess so. Right. So speaking of this kind of unique push your luck experience, what was the game that you had on your mind, Ryan?
Yeah, so... And this really did. It even kind of surprised me as I was reflecting on the push your luck genre, and as this kind of came up, it was like, wow, this is interesting how this genre can go in these different directions in ways that you may not expect. So the game in question is Codenames, which anybody that is not living under a rock for the last year in the game industry has likely seen or played several dozen, 100 times. I don't know, a lot. It's been a huge hit this last year, which is great. It's a lot of fun. But most people...
I've never heard of it.
Never heard of it. Right, yeah, never heard of it. So most people think Codenames and they immediately attribute it to being a word game at its core, right? Which is completely fair because it is. And for anyone that has not played Codenames, I apologize. I'm not going to go into detail on the mechanics. You'll have to go check it out on your own if you haven't for some reason. But that said, when you are either the spy master and you're giving clues, or you are the agents trying to make the connections on the table, the mechanism that it uses as far as how many words that the spy master tries to link together, or how many guesses you choose to make as the receiving agents, is absolutely a push your luck system that's very cleverly masked behind other stuff, which I think is pretty cool. If you want to give a clue to your teammates, which is, Apple 5, and you think you can equate 5 words on the table to Apple, that's very ambitious, and it's going to be challenging for your teammates, potentially, depending on the words, of course, to actually come up with the right answers and take that in the right direction. And so do you Do you risk that? Do you when we talked about at the beginning of this segment, talking about what push your luck really means and that risk versus reward, the reward is you could take a huge lead against your opponent's team if your teammates are able to get all those words. But if you don't, you've also kind of tipped your hand a little bit as to what some of your words may or may not be for the other team, and it might make them easier in making some of their guesses. And so it might help the opposing spy master kind of clear the way a little bit. So it's a very interesting balancing act, which is really cool.
Yeah, I never thought about that. About 3 weeks ago, we introduced a couple to Codenames, and the first game of the new player being the clue giver looks at the board and says, Force 6. And we were like, whoa, like, calm down there, jockey. Like, hang on a second.
Right.
And we started looking at the board, and we were like, oh, yeah, well, okay, that one. Okay, we got 3. We got, 4. Okay. And there's a mental thing that actually happens in your brain that you have to guess all those clues.
Right.
And sometimes you can kind of forget that, hey, we can get these 3 and then stop and hold tight. So
right.
It is, without a doubt, it's more like mental push your luck than anything else.
Right. Yeah, it does kind of psych you up. If you get that big number, you want to go the distance at the risk of, the more guesses that you're making off of a single clue, especially as you are stretching your interpretation of that clue further and further, the more risk you're going to be of hitting your opponent's words or a neutral, or worse off, the assassin, of course, and just losing. So it's a very interesting mechanism there that they utilize in a very different way, which is cool. Whereas Quartz is a lot more traditional push your luck. It still has the same feel of that reward is just within reach. I really want to get that extra gem so that I can get my my value modifier for the turn or something, in Quartz. Whereas with Codenames, you are trying to just that one, if I can get just one more word, we can just be done with that, and then we can move on to the next clue, instead of having to try to backtrack and remember, okay, this clue that we left 2 words behind, and this clue we forgot one, or we didn't get this one, or whatnot. It's that same kind of drive to just one more. Just if we can just get that one more, that'll be enough, And for me, I have a certain gravitation towards push your luck games intrinsically for me, because I have always enjoyed gambling as well, and so that kind of comes hand in hand, that desire to just just one more hand, just one more roll of the dice, come on, we can get there, just imagine if we hit right.
We actually had that happen this weekend with Quartz too. There was a 5-player game where the last player left in the mine on day 5 had 1 obsidian and about 25 points in gems on his board. And everyone started goading with, one more pull. Like, what could go wrong?
Awesome.
What could go wrong?
Right.
And he went for it and got an obsidian and busted. And had he not, he would have won the game by 2 points. So it was pretty amazing of an ending. And it definitely fed into that whole, kind of that risk reward, greed versus content, and are you willing to push it? So it was cool.
There's an excitement around push your luck, though, when you have this mechanic that does encourage you to just go a little further, because that excitement builds that kind of tension and that drama. And when you have those moments like you talked about, whether it's in Codenames where you are going for that big 5 or 6 word clue and the team gets it right and you take this huge lead, or you win the game from behind, or whatever it is, or in Quartz when you have those moments where it's just like, oh, just one more, and everyone's excited, and even your opponents are like, oh my god, is he going to do it or not, and everyone kind of gets invested in it. It's really exciting. So yeah, really cool stuff.
What about you, Chaz?
Well, the things that you talked about kind of dovetail into the game that I wanted to mention, and it's interesting. The more as I've been listening to you, the more I think about it, I can kind of see how some of these aspects of gaming fit into some of the good and bad things that have happened with this game in my experience. The game that I wanted to mention was Dread Curse. And this game is similar to Quartz in that the players are pulling these coins out of this little bag, and they're gold coins because you're pirates and you're grabbing doubloons, but 1 or 2 of the coins in the game will actually be cursed with this black spot. But the game also has player powers. Each person plays a member of the ship. You might have the captain, the first mate, the pilot, the gunner, etc. And each one of those has a special power. And from round to round, those powers will shift around. So it's not like someone's always this person. You're going to be moving these special abilities around. So everyone's going to have a different special ability each round. And these special abilities let you steal from other players or do things or defend and all sorts of crazy stuff back and forth. There's a lot of player interaction going on. And I think that might be one of the issues with this game that's kind of prevented it from being a real big hit with some of the people I've introduced it to, is because there's so much player interaction going on that it kind of muddies the water and it kind of makes it too chaotic. So I've been wondering, when it comes to a push your luck game, it seems like you need some player interaction, but is it necessary to mitigate how much player interaction you allow as a game designer in order to prevent the game from just becoming a chaotic mess?
That's a really good
question, because there are push your luck dice games or just push your luck games that are like multiplayer solitaire. Right. And then there are others that are to the other end of that spectrum, like what you just described, where it's like you're constantly in connection. I think that's I think the answer to that is it depends. It depends on your game group. There's game groups that will love to interact all the time, and I'll make this alliance, and we'll do this if you don't do that, and have that constant connection point. And then there's others that are perfectly fine with the kind of multiplayer solitaire of, okay, I'm done, your turn. And that's cool. I think there's a place for all of them. I think it's just a matter of what each person's game group kind of feeds off of the most, and what makes the most fun night for them.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think for me, when I reflect on push your luck as a mechanic or as a genre of game, I think one of the drawbacks that is inherent to it is like Scott mentioned, the fact that luck is just baked into the mechanic. There is, and depending on the game, there is varying amounts of luck involved. I introduced Quartz to a group that I play with regularly after we came back from Gen Con, and for the most part it went over very well. We did have one guy who played with us, and on his first turn he had this huge pull. I mean, it was just one of those unbelievable rounds where he just kept going, and he had no obsidian yet, and he must have had $50 or $60 worth of value in gems on his board and just kept going. Another guy was doing the same and keeping up with him relatively well. It was pretty incredible. The original player finally draws his first obsidian and says, okay, on my next turn I'm probably going to pass. Well, then on the next player's turn, he plays a card that sends an obsidian over to the first player's mine and breaks his cart, and the guy loses all his money. And he thought, wow, I had all this stuff, and that was just luck that he had the right card, and there's nothing I could have done about that, right? And that was a dissatisfying first experience. We went on to play a little bit more, and he enjoyed it, I think, a little more by the end as he got a better feel for what the all the different cards are and the different interactions were. But point being, as I ramble on here, is that luck element, that heavy luck element that's baked into the mechanic is sometimes off-putting. And so, to your point, how much I think adding that player interaction and that extra little bit of player agency is important. But your point about is there a line? Is there a point where you've added too much to where it is too chaotic? I don't know. I think, like to Scott's point, it does probably depend a lot on the group and depend on the game. There's so many little variables as to whether or not a game will fire for a group, whether it's theme, whether it's playtime, whether it's components or the mechanics or whatever. There's so many little bits about it. But yeah, I think adding some amount of player interaction, player agency is important. If you look at one of the oldest push your luck games that you can really point to in gaming, if you go to all the way back to, say, Yahtzee, for example, where it's very multiplayer solitaire, right? Everyone takes your turn, you roll 3 dice or 5 dice, and then you get a couple re-rolls, and the only real player agency you have there is whether you assign your dice to your top or bottom sections and how you fill your personal sheet out, right? But there's no real player interaction. And for most people nowadays, a game like Yahtzee is not going to have a lot of shelf life, right? Because it's just not that interactive, it's not that engaging, and that model's been improved upon in so many different ways. And so, yeah, I think again, getting back to your original point, I think having all that player interaction is important, but too much is maybe something to be worried about. Yeah, so
I don't know. I would argue that Yahtzee's pretty much a staple, considering how much of it Hasbro sells on a year-to-year basis, and how many.
Sure.
I mean, in my house, I know I have Coke Yahtzee, Doctor Who Yahtzee, Firefly Yahtzee. There's all these different.
Well,
options,
it's a whole other
right?
topic
So,
if you want to talk about the collectability
Sure,
and the branding and so
collectability.
forth, that could be a whole other topic, collectability in board games. But
Sure.
But that said, I think for the audience that we are likely to have listening to us chatting about games here and about Passport games in particular, Yahtzee probably is not a game that they are actively looking to put to the table. But I could be wrong. Let us know if you regularly play Yahtzee and enjoy that as a push your luck game. Make that part of follow up with us and let us know.
Yes. If you disagree with Ryan, be sure to track down Chaz in the street and yell at him in his face.
That's exactly right. That's how we do all of our official communication is on the street.
Bring your own megaphone, though. But it's always nice to kind of get a little feedback from the audience as we go along. So I wanted to try and wrap up the show every now and then with a question from the board gaming community. So our first question comes from no one, because since this is our first episode, we didn't bother to solicit anyone for questions and haven't received any questions yet. So we're just starting out. So what we want is to receive your questions, and we can do that through a myriad of different ways. If you have a question that you would like to have us answer on an upcoming episode, you are welcome to send it to us either through the PGS website at passportgamestudios.com/contact or our Facebook page at facebook.com/passportgamestudios, all one word, or on Twitter, where our Twitter name is at Passport Games. And if you send us a question, be sure to include the hashtag PGS podcast, and that'll make it float to the top, and we'll be able to get to it sooner. Since we don't have any listener questions, is there a question that one of you had that we could address as we wrap up the show?
Yeah. So we had a conversation this weekend about games that are like other games, or games that make you think of other games. And then it dovetailed into games that you would combine. So my question for everyone, and I'll answer it as well, is going to be, if you could pick any two games out of our catalog and smash them up and make a new game using either themes or components or whatever from those, what two would you pick and why? So I'll go ahead and I'll give you mine, and then you can give me yours. Mine would actually be Quantum and Tokaido, so I could have like Tokaido in space, and I think it would be awesome to like. I know, right? It's amazing. I think it would be cool to travel
Journey
from
star
constellation to
system
constellation.
yeah, right.
Exactly. Yeah. Same concept. Have the most enriching journey, and you could even, instead of using a pawn, you could have a die or whatever, and it could change, abilities as you go to different places. It would be the possibilities are endless.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Let's get this happening. These are both Funforge games. Let's get these
Right,
together.
you never know.
Let's make it happen.
You never know. Yep. I think it could produce a really cool little offspring. So
Yeah, that'd be cool.
What about you, Ryan?
So thinking about our catalog and stuff that I've been that's been in the front of my mind that I've been excited to play here coming up, I would really like to see a game that I think I would call Witch Hunt Magnate, in which we combine
Wow.
Salem and Food Chain Magnate, in which you're trying to build. This might be a little dark. I'm sorry. In which you're trying to build your, little employee group of witch hunters to go through the town of Salem, and you have to have the most effective group to go and suss out the witches and hang as many people effectively as possible, right?
boy, that
and
got
make
dark
and make
real
the
quick.
community safe and happy. That's what it's about.
There you go. So you want to put up billboards to say, "Are you a witch hunter? We need you."
That's exactly right. That's no, I
funny.
think
that's cool. That's a different. I would not have thought of those two at all.
those are two that are
To mash up.
Yeah, right. Those are two high on my list that I'm excited to play that I've not played just yet since I've joined Passport, and so yeah, those immediately came to mind right now. Just there you go.
Well, now I'm like really intrigued as to what two Chaz is going to pick.
All right. Well, see, I would start with Samurai Spirit because it's a nice game and you're protecting this village. And, these bad guys are coming in and burning the village to the ground and destroying it. And you defend the village. But there's no sense of closure at the end. All you do is you defend this village and, what happens to all these ruffians? How does their story end? That's why I would combine Samurai Spirit with And Then We Held Hands. That way, the players get a chance to reconcile.
And then we held samurais.
Then we held katanas.
And then samurais held hands.
Yes, and you get that sense of closure that you need at the end of a struggle like that, where everyone can come together and rebuild the village together and live in harmony.
Nice. That would be a really fun combination, actually. And then we held katanas.
There we go. Thank you for joining us for this first episode of the Passport Game Studios podcast. Join us again in 2 weeks for the next installment, in which we'll be exploring another topic about board games and the board game industry. Between now and then, we'll also be posting some game overviews and playthroughs on our YouTube channel over at youtube.com/PassportGameStudios. In the meantime, join the discussion by contacting us through our website at PassportGameStudios.com, on our Facebook page at facebook.com/PassportGameStudios, or on Twitter where we are at PassportGames. We welcome your comments and questions and may even feature them on an upcoming episode. So contact us and let us know what's on your mind. Until then, thanks for joining us. And remember that not only board games, but life, too, is a journey where adventure awaits.